Welcome to Deep History, the podcast that uncovers the hidden stories, forgotten places, and strange echoes of the past still hiding in plain sight. Over the past few episodes, we've been following the road to November 22nd, 1963. We've walked the streets of Oak Cliff, we've retraced Lee Harvey Oswald's final hours of freedom, and we visited the places forever tied to one of the most consequential days in American history. But today, we're leaving the crime scene behind. Because before there was Dealey Plaza, there was Dallas. Not the skyline we know today, but a city transformed by oil money, political ambition, Cold War fears, and a growing sense that America was changing too quickly. It was a city where influential voices warned of communism, questioned the federal government, resisted social change, and believed the country's future was hanging in the balance. Those voices didn't all come from the same place. They came from newspaper offices, church pulpits, radio microphones, political rallies, and some of the wealthiest boardrooms in Texas. Today, we're meeting the people who helped shape Dallas in 1963. Not because they were part of a conspiracy, but because to understand the tragedy, you have to understand the atmosphere that enabled it. So grab your shovel. It's time to dig deep.
Hey, Lee.
Hey, Bob. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. This is going to be a very interesting episode today.
That's what we like to tell ourselves.
Well, because all the rest of them are only semi-interesting. So this one's going to be actual interesting.
Just going to knock the doors off. Okay. I gotcha. Good.
Let's start by, as usual, talking about where we are today, because it fits a bit with the theme of the podcast. We're at a new place called Jack Ruby's. It's new for us. Yes, the name is Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby Saloon. Yeah.
Yes. And it's kind of fun. We're in here. There's a light crowd this morning. We had a good breakfast, and we're looking out down the street. You can see Dealey Plaza. So we're very close, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But it's a cool place, and what's called the West End area of Dallas.
Yep.
And by the way, the World Cup is going on as we speak.
That's
so
true.
We expect people to be coming in and out, and that's good. That's all part of the charm. So,
and for those of you that don't know where Jack Ruby's is yet, if you remember where Dick's Last Resort used to be, that's the spot.
yeah. And before that, what was it, Lee?
Oh,
For
God,
those
don't,
that are
don't get me
older than 50.
I'm not old enough. I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember because I probably spent too much time at Dick's Last Resort.
You don't remember
My
because
brain.
you're too old.
I
don't remember because I'm not old enough.
Yeah. All right. Let's go with that. So let's talk a little bit about what today's episode is. So Lee, introduce that for us because I'm not entirely sure. So go ahead.
That does sound about right. So, we've been on a little bit of a story arc around the assassination of JFK. We want to do deep history, so we're not going directly at it. And If you're looking for an assassination podcast, there are, I don't know, somewhere around 75,000 of those that you can hit.
At least.
So, we're continuing to look at things on the edges of the assassination. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about, one of the biggest characters in the story of the assassination, is the city of Dallas itself.
Right.
Mm-hmm. The political and cultural climate of Dallas in the 60s.
Right.
And what led up to a city that actually we're starting to get people coming in the door. We're getting more and more people. So sorry, we were.
Well, once they heard that we were recording here, that people just
that
swarmed.
does tend to bring them in, doesn't it? Yeah. But yeah, so, in 63, Dallas is really a symbolic capital of militant conservatism.
Right.
Not even just kind of middle of the road conservatism, but militant conservatism.
Right.
And it is a city that very vociferously hated Kennedy.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I mean, you had a.
Obviously, that's a very broad brush.
Yeah. But
so
there was an element of that was strong.
There was
in Dallas. Yeah.
There was, and there was a substantial echo chamber that we're going to get to as we unfold this podcast. Bob, I'm thinking this is going to be a 2-episode arc.
I think you're probably right, just because we're so verbose. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be phenomenal, succinct content. So yes, let's be prepared for 2, because there's a lot I think to do that will lead up to understanding the environment, not only the environment, but how it contributed to just not only the assassination, but everything before and after that. and that it's important to understand. So
Yeah, 100%. So I think, in my mind, I've kind of bifurcated things a little bit between some characters, some of the people that were really helping to shape
right,
the culture of Dallas in the early 60s.
right,
And then for our next episode, I'm thinking we can talk a little bit about the events.
right.
Obviously what we talk about today is going to help shape what we talk about in our next episode.
Right.
But let's start out with some of those key characters, if you'll
Okay.
indulge me.
Right.
And I'll take you. And
let me also mention what I would like to do then is insert.
I'm not interested in that.
And yeah, but I don't care. So what I would like to do is insert a bit about Kennedy himself and his journey to the point of his presidency and some of his not only political ideas, but what shaped him. But because I think it's an interesting, not only contrast, but almost a dichotomy with what happened here in the early 60s.
So how
Dallas.
about I do my stuff, and then if we still have time, you can get
I
that.
see. Priorities.
My
Okay.
priorities.
In fact, I agree with that because mine will be about 10 seconds. So go ahead.
All right. So we'll include Kennedy and his rise
There's
as
guy,
one of the
Lee.
characters.
There's a guy named Kennedy that's part of
as
this.
one of the characters in the story. All right. That's very fair.
Okay.
Certainly understand it. So, what we're going to talk about, or the people that we're going to talk about, are some of the most loudest and most influential voices in Dallas in the early 60s.
Okay.
And you can be an assassination student,
Yeah.
and not know some of these people.
Right.
So, we're going deep. We're going deeper
Right.
than most, but yeah, there might be some names that people are not expecting to hear here.
I think that's because most people begin their observation or their study in 63. And what happens prior to that is not of much interest, actually, until you get into deeper conspiracies, and maybe it comes up. But this, to me, is worthy of our discussion. So
it's definitely setting the stage.
Yeah.
So, and I want to be clear, the people that we're talking about today were not implicated in any conspiracies.
No.
They're, what they did that we're going to talk about, not even illegal in any way.
Right.
But they created a culture, or they supported a culture and a zeitgeist that led to the political climate
that
of
was
Dallas
here
in 1963.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, was one of the reasons that Kennedy felt like he needed to come here, because there's fragmentation going on in his own party. So we'll get into that more. But
Good.
So,
good to hear. So let's start off with Edwin Walker.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Edwin Walker?
Now, can I take a guess?
Wow. Sure.
There's a road not far from here called Walton Walker. Is there any relationship to that?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, that's my
I can neither
guess.
confirm nor deny that.
I am a bit familiar, but please expound on this.
So Edwin Walker was a retired U.S. Army major general.
Okay.
And he is operating in Dallas in 63 essentially as a full-time political activist. He's a speaker. He's leading a movement, and this movement is ultra-conservatism. I mean, he's doing so from his Dallas home. He actually lived right on Turtle Creek.
Was he part of any particular party? Was he Republican? What was his?
Very much so.
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
yeah, okay.
And having that military background, we're going to talk a little bit about his retirement. Was it was a mutual decision.
Yeah.
So, but by the time he's here in Dallas, and I believe I was mentioning, so he lived on Turtle Creek. And I once upon a time lived literally 5 houses down from him. I didn't live on Turtle Creek, but I lived in a house right around the corner.
Similar, I mean, in the same neighborhood, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I saw his house a number of times, and his house is going to come up again here in just a little bit. Interesting little story about that as well. But, he's no longer in the Army when he's here in Dallas. He's not holding an elective office, but he is one of those.
Is this? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is this like 1960? What's the time frame for this?
Yeah, early 60s.
Okay.
He's operating in Dallas, and he he's out of the Army in 1961.
Okay.
Comes to Dallas shortly after that.
Right.
So, and I guess we would call him today a political firebrand.
Yeah.
Right?
He was vocal.
He was very vocal. He had some very clear-cut ideas about the political environment in the United States, the direction it was going, and he had some serious concerns.
Okay.
He spent a lot of his time promoting conservative causes, fighting integration efforts. He's warning everyone about communism.
Yeah.
And he's maintaining. Well, he's cultivating a national profile among right-wing activists.
Okay.
So he's, in a certain sense, he's an activist's activist. Right. And it's important to note that he didn't come to Dallas because he wanted to change it.
Right.
He came to Dallas because it was ripe for what he wanted to talk about.
I see. So
he had a ready-made audience here.
Okay. So he had a there was a lot of identification or association with his message that he understood that when he was coming to Dallas, based on whatever his investigation he did.
Right.
So
yeah.
So okay.
That's a fair way. But by 1963. He's one of the most controversial men in Dallas.
Yeah, right.
And he's a symbol of the city's reputation for political extremism.
Yeah,
which was already fairly well advanced.
Yeah,
by the time he got here, but by 1963, it's certainly so. So I mentioned a retired major general in the U.S. Army. So in spite of his distinguished military career, he served in World War II and Korea.
Right.
His career ended when he was accused of strongly promoting conservative political views to troops under his command.
Yeah, so he wasn't neutral. He was biased, obviously.
Very much so.
And the problem is he was trying to influence his
absolutely
subordinates, and that's a problem.
Who's the commander in chief in 1961 when he resigns from the Army?
Oh, there's this guy named Kennedy.
They were somewhat at odds.
There's a little annoyance with that.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
So the Army accused Walker of indoctrinating soldiers politically, which was a big no-no then, and it still should be today. I think it's a little less so, but
right.
But so he resigns from the Army in 61. In 62, he becomes heavily involved in the protests surrounding the enrollment of James Meredith, who was the first African-American student to enroll at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss.
Yes, absolutely.
Walker is arrested and he's charged with insurrection-related offenses, although the charges were eventually dropped. But this brought him such national profile. Yeah, it elevated his national profile so much that he becomes known around the country as a lightning rod in national politics. Yeah, please.
Well, and you recall who the Attorney General was that pushed the Meredith integration or enrollment into the university. There was this.
I think there's a similar tie-in with that Attorney General, right?
Yes.
So that would be another Kennedy.
Yeah, Bobby Kennedy, of course, under Jack's direction.
Sure.
They took a necessary and aggressive action to be able to make that happen. So that resentment's probably building to all things named Kennedy. So
exactly right. And Walker is really he's becoming a face of this anti-Kennedy mindset. Certainly in Dallas, but definitely doing so nationwide as well. In the Ole Miss protest, really kind of, and we're going to talk a little bit about how in just a moment, but really elevated his reputation nationally.
Yeah.
But so on April 10th, 1963, a gunman fired a shot through the window of that Turtle Creek home that I was just telling you about. And it narrowly misses. It bounced off the window frame of the home and just narrowly missed actually killing Edwin Walker.
Right.
You know who authorities later identified as the gunman?
Let me guess. Someone that was around in 1963 who was affiliated.
A gun owner?
And maybe by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald.
You're exactly right.
I'm brilliant. Yes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Which is, think about that for a second. And it's something that I don't know that we're ever going to get to the bottom of. It's amazing. I mean, in April of '63, Oswald attempts to assassinate one of Kennedy's loudest critics.
Yeah.
And then 7 months later, he assassinates Kennedy.
Right. Which was I tell you about Oswald that we talked about in previous
episodes? There's a lack
episodes.
of stability to the man.
Stability and erratic behavior and self-worth issues. So, yes,
absolutely.
That's some more evidence on that.
Absolutely. And they actually didn't solve the attempted assassination of Walker until after the Kennedy assassination.
That's right. Okay.
So they didn't put all those pieces together until the investigation that went on afterward.
Wow.
But after that assassination attempt, Walker's stature continues to grow nationally. Many conservatives viewed him as a victim of political violence,
right?
As a patriot who was targeted for his beliefs.
Yeah. So what you're saying is this attempt actually played his hand and
it did
empowered him even more so.
It did.
It's funny how that happens.
Any of that sound familiar by chance? It's
I mean, it's awful and disgusting, but there's dynamics sometimes.
There's a theme. There's repetition. I think they say history repeats itself
over and over.
So Walker continues to speak and he continues to organize from Dallas, and this attempt, as I said, places him even more at the center of the fervor in Dallas in 1963, and he's only fanning those flames more and more and more.
Right.
He really becomes the embodiment of the forces that had been reshaping Dallas. So we're in. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Good
so
man.
We're talking anti-communist fervor. We're talking resistance to civil rights. We're talking political radicalization and fear of federal authority.
You're right.
Thank you, sir. Which is really what Walker stood for.
Yeah.
So that's the message that he's getting out into the world. And these are the early stages of what led to Dallas having the title, the City of Hate, on the heels of Kennedy's assassination.
Right. And to your point, this wasn't that obscure. This was recognized and known, and we'll talk about some more things that were going on in Dallas. So this is some forgotten history, but this is a very important part of what was happening here, in that time frame. And it was recognized by a large portion of the country. Right. So, yeah.
So we've got another figure to talk about now. That really talks about kind of the I don't want to call it fringe because it's not fringe, but Walker really embodies that radical element.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about H.L. Hunt.
Yeah.
Who is another key character in Dallas.
Right.
And in the Dallas story of the early 60s. If Walker was the face of Dallas conservatism, Hunt was easily or arguably its financial engine.
Yeah.
I think, as one of the richest men in America, he brought clout, he brought influence, and he brought legitimacy to that far right movement that was encroaching so heavily.
He brought capital,
and certainly he brought money. So, if you live in Dallas, you know who the Hunt family is.
Right. Even if you live outside to some degree.
I'm working my way through that. But Hunt Oil and its myriad subsidiaries are still at the forefront of the oil and gas industry today.
Right.
I live literally in the shadow of the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge.
That's right.
Margaret is HL's daughter.
Right.
And she was a very prominent philanthropist here in
Dallas.
Things. Yeah, she really did. She did a lot of good.
Yeah.
But if you don't live in Dallas and you're not tied to the oil and gas industry, you're still going to recognize H.L. Hunt because his son, Lamar, founded the Kansas City Chiefs.
Absolutely.
And I want to get into that story one of these days. The Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Texans.
Let's do that one.
I think that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, that'll be fun. It'll be a different type of subject matter than what we have now. But we probably need some of that. So that's a good idea.
Absolutely. No, it'll be a good one. But so, Lamar Hunt Jr. Continues to control the Chiefs today.
Yeah.
So even if you don't know much about oil and gas, you still know the Hunt name.
Descendants of
very prominent family of billionaires even today.
Yeah. Right.
So Hunt is very heavily aligned with most of the key tenets that Walker had been espousing.
Right.
You know, that anti-communist fervor. He was anti-big government. He's skeptical of federal power.
Right.
He believed that America was drifting towards socialism.
Mm-hmm.
He viewed the Cold War as an existential struggle.
Yeah.
He worried that Washington was getting too powerful and that Washington was intervening too much in the day-to-day lives of citizens.
Right.
And while that wasn't uncommon in Texas, what made him unusual is the point you made earlier. He had the resources to promote his concerns on a national level.
Right.
That's where the money comes in. You know,
money matters.
He was a mere millionaire back then, but his in today's dollars, he would have been a billionaire. Again, one of the richest men in America.
Would he have been a trillionaire?
Nope. Only one of those.
After yesterday's
only one of
IPO,
those.
yes. Okay.
I don't know that I can deal with having a trillionaire on the planet. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think Elon is one white cat from being away from being a James Bond villain. You know, and him having trillionaires and all that kind of stuff. Ugh, I don't know. But anyway, so that's where H.L. Hunt comes in, right? He's bringing that legitimacy. He's bringing the capital that you mentioned.
Right.
And one of the ways that he did this was he had a radio program. You know about this? It's called Lifeline.
I think I've vaguely heard about this. So please enlighten me.
Absolutely. Happy to. Okay. So it was, episodes typically ran about 5 minutes, but it was nationally syndicated.
Right.
And he did the writing. And he was the actual host, so it was him talking as well.
Right.
And in a very deliberate monotone, he would speak to the evils of communism and the rise of federal overreach and threats to individual liberty and the decline of traditional American values.
They're classic themes.
Again, anything sound familiar here?
Yeah.
We're still having the same conversations 60 years after this.
Yeah. And even prior to that, that was always the contrast between some of the libertarians or different parties.
Right.
And not to get too deep on this, but prior to the 60s, the interesting thing that made the two-party system work even more effectively is you had a span of identity and span of beliefs within the parties themselves. So you could coalesce a little better. You could compromise a little better.
Yeah.
But now you see in a situation in the early 60s in Dallas with extremism is beginning to surface a little with the backdrop of civil rights. And now you're preparing for the fissures. They're coming, right? So
exactly. And, things move from extreme to mainstream very quickly, and it's due to the cast of characters that we're talking about here.
Right.
So, in 63, Dallas was already known as a heavily moneyed city. The oil wells had created because oil had created such a wealthy culture here in Dallas.
Right.
And many of the business leaders shared Hunt's fears. Again, communism, labor unions.
Yeah.
I keep reiterating these things because they were the tenets.
They were real.
They were the tent poles of the chaos that was going on.
Right.
So, in spite of the fact that Hunt was an intensely private person, he became the most famous representative of these ideas.
Right.
Certainly in Dallas and to a certain extent nationwide.
Right.
And to his admirers, Hunt was the embodiment of American self-reliance.
Yes.
To his critics, he was the patron and financier of a politics that was growing darker and darker and more extreme.
Right. Yeah.
So which man you saw really depended on which side of the coin you happen to be viewing.
That's an excellent point. And which tribe you happen to belong to in any given time, which we know how influential that is.
Absolutely. Right? And we're going to talk a little bit later. You mentioned tribe. The tribalism that we see so much in politics. We're going to touch on that in a little bit. But, again, the key about Hunt is that he lent all of this credibility. Fringe ideas sound a lot different coming from a millionaire who, as I said, would have been a billionaire in today's dollars.
Right.
They sound a lot different coming from a billionaire than they do coming from a man on the street corner with a bullhorn.
Sure. Right.
So whereas Edwin Walker mobilized crowds and auditoriums, Hunt built a platform that was large enough to reach the entire country.
He legitimized
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The message, basically.
Absolutely.
And that you see that happen so often when you see a movement really lose its moral compass, right?
Yep.
And I think that's a good example of it. And without, and this, I'm not trying to be critical of the Hunts at all, but without that kind of um, representation, that brand, that money, some of these movements really don't take off. You got to have the support behind them.
Some wind in the sails.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And that's probably what happened here. So,
I definitely, and that's kind of what we're talking about is,
right.
An echo chamber was created and there are 4 walls to the echo chamber, and Walker was one of them. Hunt was another one.
Right.
We're going to talk next about, we've got 2 more people to hit here as well. But so there's an echo chamber that was not consolidated. It wasn't coordinated.
Yeah.
But it came into being one way or the other.
Yeah.
And,
it aligned.
It aligns. And it's almost, tragedy was almost inevitable. I don't know that anybody could have foreseen the assassination of a president.
There was some happenstance and some, this particular incident with the assassination was not preordained. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
It's just that
that's why I said, I didn't say the assassination was inevitable,
right?
But some sort of tragedy,
right.
is
something was coming
inevitable,
ahead,
right?
Yeah.
We don't know exactly what it is until, unfortunately, we find out. Okay, so Ted Dealey is our next cast member.
Okay,
what do you know? Does that name sound familiar by chance?
Well, if I was to look out the window here, I can look down. I believe that's Market Street, and I could probably see the Dealey Plaza. Now, is there any association with that?
That's an excellent guess. Very, very good guess. So, Dealey Plaza is actually named after George Bannerman Dealey.
Is it Plaza or Plaza?
Well, I go with Plaza.
All right, but as hillbillies, we say Plaza.
I think you do.
Okay.
We've touched on your hillbilly accents in previous podcasts.
Comes through.
So, yes. And as I watch Bob sip a Coors Light, no, I'm sorry. It's a Coors Original, not a Coors Light.
Coors, baby.
Yeah, full Coors.
Yeah.
So, talking about hillbilly here. And sorry to all of our hillbilly listeners out there.
We don't want to offend anyone.
No, we don't.
We have so many of those.
So if you're the listener that's a hillbilly, we appreciate you. Know that we love you. But yeah, so Ted Dealey is the son of George Bannerman Dealey, for whom Dealey Plaza is named. And George was the publisher at one time of the Dallas Morning News. In 1963, Ted is the publisher of the Dallas Morning News. He's a deeply conservative voice here in Texas, and he is really heavily aligned with the business establishment.
Sure.
And I think, it kind of goes without saying, the folks that we're talking about are incredibly influential people here in Dallas. They've got platforms.
Yeah.
And Dealey really embodies that permeation of anti-Kennedy sentiment within the establishment. He's demonstrating often with bold headlines in his newspaper that anti-Kennedy zeal was not limited to just extremists.
Right.
It's making it into print, right? It's in the Dallas Morning News. It could be found in boardrooms. It was in country clubs.
Can I make an observation here?
Churches, please.
And this is what's, I think, somewhat interesting is when you talk about the anti-Kennedy zeal, you have to think about what were the reasons for that. What was the offensive nature of Kennedy to these people, right? And I would suggest that there may have been some political positions that were different,
right?
Obviously, but I also would say that a lot of that was just momentum. That because he was part of the Democratic Party, and because he was not associated with this particular group of people, that created some of this zeal and some of this anger. Which
Bob, he was Catholic.
And my point,
and that's another big deal,
right? And I think we're going to see more of this when I finally get a chance to talk.
I'm trying to keep that from happening.
Yeah, but you'll see that some of this is just driven by fervor and momentum and anger, and sometimes points are not even legitimate. And, we
Sure.
see this all the time. But let's keep our eye on that one because you're going to see some interesting conflict to their position.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to hold off on the Catholic thing. I know that I threw it out there, but we'll call that foreshadowing for the moment. We'll call it foreshadowing.
Let's do that.
Yeah. But so the Dallas Morning News at the time was frequently critical of Kennedy. It spoke about the concerns it had around, and when I say it was Ted Dealey. He was the editorial voice, right?
He's the editor,
So everything went through him.
Mm-hmm.
Federal expansion, civil rights initiatives, labor unions that we've talked about.
Yeah.
I hate to keep going back ad nauseum and repeating the same sort of themes, but they're the same sort of themes for a reason.
Right.
And when you're reading that in the newspaper every day,
Mm-hmm.
you can't really escape it.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're beginning to see in the early 60s, Dallas is becoming that echo chamber I talked about, working overtime to convert non-believers to the ultra-conservative stance of several of its most influential citizens.
Yeah, right.
Not all of them. I want to be careful.
course.
I'm not painting with a broad brush.
No.
Or anything like that. But
we're talking about the element that's relative to this particular discussion.
Agreed.
And that is still prominent. Right.
I'm tiptoeing a little bit more than I normally do here. So,
but it's real. I mean, these things are always, there's more gray and they're always, a little more complicated. But there was a serious element here, a group of powerful people that drove the agenda. And I think that's a theme.
And to his supporters, Dealey is a bastion of responsible journalism.
Mm-hmm.
But to his critics, he was fostering a climate of hostility.
Right.
So again, I mentioned the two sides of the coin for Hunt. Same thing with Dealey. It just depends on which side of the coin you happen to be looking at, and you can make an argument for both.
Right. Exactly.
But Dealey didn't hide just behind the newspaper.
Right.
In October of 1961, Kennedy came to Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And he met with local business leaders.
Mm-hmm.
During that meeting, Dealey stood up.
Mm-hmm.
And he addressed the president directly with a line that is most often remembered as, so it's paraphrased a little bit.
Yeah.
But the quote was, "Many people in Texas think that you and your administration are riding Carolyn's tricycle." Carolyn Kennedy being, Jack's 4-year-old daughter.
Right.
So the implication's clear there. I mean, we've got the head of the publisher of the Dallas Morning News standing up and belittling the president of the United States in a forum filled with business leaders.
Yeah.
The implication is a lack of respect, that the president is weak, not to be taken seriously. And Kennedy took the comment in stride, but the exchange made national news.
Yeah, right.
So that,
it was embarrassing to some people. I mean, it's just, probably some in that room, all right, to be fair. But still, that's a representation of those positions.
Absolutely.
And the way Dallas was beginning
by a prominent civic leader in the city.
Exactly.
So, again, the key reason that I bring up Dealey is because he was that editorial voice of the Dallas Morning News. The paper by no means advocated violence, but its critical tone helped move anti-Kennedy sentiment from the world of the political junkies that were really tuned into politics and what was going on to the front pages and into the civic mainstream. Right. So Dealey was the lens through which many Dallasites consumed their news, and the tone was decidedly anti-JFK.
Sure. Right.
So that's a little bit about Ted Dealey.
Wow.
Got another guy I want to talk to you about.
All right.
And we're in Texas.
Yeah.
We're in the South.
Right.
W.A. Criswell. So Criswell was the longtime pastor of the First Baptist Church here in Dallas.
Yeah.
By the early 60s, he's one of the most influential Southern Baptist ministers in America.
Right.
His sermons are broadcast widely. I see Bob looking at mic levels now.
Yes, but that means nothing, Lee.
Okay, so don't panic.
No, I was just dozing
We're getting
off.
this down.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Making sure.
Yes.
But yeah, so Criswell, his sermons are broadcast widely, they're published nationally, and they're heard by thousands every week.
Right.
When he spoke, people listened. not in just the church members, but politicians listened,
Right.
business leaders listened. All of Dallas
Yeah.
was listening, or at the very least within earshot.
Yeah, he had a lot of power.
He
Yeah.
did. He did indeed. But here's where that Catholic thing comes in. So Criswell kept people tuned into the Catholic controversy around Kennedy.
Yep.
And this was a much bigger deal in 1963 than it is today.
Of course.
At least I think it is. Right?
Yeah.
I can't speak to it entirely, but I certainly think
It is.
People feared papal influence over the U.S. government in the early 60s. They feared an erosion of Protestant power and cultural dominance.
Right.
Nobody could deny that Kennedy was charismatic. And if there were indeed significant concerns about the influence that Catholics could gain if Kennedy decided to ignore the separation of church and state, and bring Catholicism into the United States, right? He would have been probably a very popular venue or vector in which to do.
Well, and I think part of that is there's two sides of that coin. And
we
later
are using that metaphor a ton.
Yes,
two sides of the coin. That's the third time today.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So
for me,
all right,
it's 2-1 me right now.
Okay. So I think obviously that was a huge challenge for Kennedy, and not to stray from the theme that you're on right now, but that challenge, he was able, because of his mastery of politics and his ability to communicate, he was able to change that into almost an advantage, because you remember this speech where basically said, I'm not a Catholic who's happened to be running for president. I'm running for president who happens to be Catholic.
Yep, absolutely.
And people began to admire him as a man of faith. And at that time, especially, that was extremely important. So that came across really well, and it began to serve him well as he was running for the presidency. Right. But he had to address it. He initially tried to ignore it. But there was still, especially in Dallas, and to your point, there was a concern about people influence.
Right. Yep.
And that's really, I think, the theme here. Where was his allegiance? And obviously the history of the whole, Protestant movement is one about that particular influence. Exactly. And so I think that was a real question for these people. And then, it's understandable. And it sounds like it was leveraged to a good degree by the people in power in the early 60s. So
absolutely. Yes, without a doubt. And, Criswell took up that banner.
Yeah.
And fought what he considered to be the good fight.
Right.
Against that potentially creeping Catholic influence. But I want to reiterate, Criswell didn't advocate hatred or violence. That was not, he's still, at the end of the day, he is he's a Protestant minister.
Right.
He's not doing
absolutely
anything like that.
Criswell's doing what he would do.
Absolutely.
Right. This is not
exactly right or wrong. It's not.
And you understand the times, and you understand
because it's different.
The fear from that message, and sure.
But what he did do was he helped reinforce the idea that Kennedy represented something culturally foreign to Southern Protestants.
I think it's a beautiful way of putting it. Yep. Is he was a foreigner, and everything that came with that.
And let's not forget
whatever that
Can
is.
We trust a foreigner, the mindset.
So. Yeah, it's easy.
So Criswell becomes just one more wall in that echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
He reinforced an atmosphere of cultural anxiety and a fear of change.
Right.
Walker, Hunt, Dealey, and Criswell all came from different spheres, but they were expressing versions of similar concerns.
So that coalesced here in the early 60s to really have this fervor. It
did. So
almost out of control.
Imagine this scene in Dallas in 1963. You're a businessman. I'll loosely use that term to define you.
Very loose.
So, but so you read Ted Dealey's editorial over breakfast in the Dallas Morning News.
Right.
You then hop in your car and you go to the headquarters of your company. You listen to H.L. Hunt's radio commentary on your way.
Right.
Then you happen to hear Edwin Walker speak at a civic event.
Yeah.
And then you go to church and you hear W.A. Criswell. These aren't isolated
I can
voices.
assure you, I would have been in the same boat. I would have had the same belief system. That's who we are as human beings.
Absolutely.
This is what we do. So
and they form an ecosystem, and that's that echo chamber that I keep referencing.
Right.
The rhetoric becomes almost inescapable, and the city gets whipped into a lather from different angles.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I've mentioned, some sort of tragedy becomes almost an inevitability due to the fact that folks have been whipped into a leather. And I feel like you disagree with me on that point to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But
to a certain extent,
I see it as Dallas being a powder keg in need of a spark. Something's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, the messages are coming from every direction. Edwin Walker is supplying the outrage. Hunt is supplying the money. Dealey is supplying the legitimacy. Criswell is supplying something even more powerful than all of that, moral authority.
Right.
So, and they're all telling versions of that same story, that America's changing, Washington is a part of the problem, and something precious is being lost.
We never heard that, or the life of the country. Yeah, I mean, the lifespan of the country. It's pretty amazing. So that's a great summary and culmination of the powers that be that are so often not understood, right? For the early 60s.
But I'm not done yet, Bob.
Okay. No, you're not. Keep going. This is good.
I'll wrap this up quickly because this goes.
Well, I have nothing, so keep going.
So this part goes to the tribalism. We always, you and I have conversations offline about belonging and that tribal mentality that humans naturally have.
Mm-hmm.
So the John Birch Society, you know what the John Birch Society is?
Enlighten me.
Okay. Actually, I've got here in my notes, ask Bob if he knows what the John Birch Society is. And then my very next word is wrong. So I had a feeling you were going to be wrong. You didn't even try to attack
I knew this was a trap.
Didn't even try to attack it. Well, so the John Birch Society is founded in 1958, and it's an intensely anti-communist organization, and they believed that communist influence had penetrated many American institutions.
Yeah,
okay?
So this is even post-McCarthyism, correct?
It is, yeah.
Which is phenomenal. You still have this evolving.
It's still going on. Yeah, without a doubt. So over time, some Birchers, as they were called, advanced increasingly controversial claims, including allegations that high-ranking government officials were knowingly aiding communist goals.
Right.
That they claimed that organizations were working to import communism to the United States.
Yep.
And even in 1963. By the time 1963 rolls around, many Americans are viewing the society as being on the far edge of conservative politics.
Yeah,
so it's out there.
Right.
It didn't originate in Dallas, but it proved fertile ground.
I think that's been part of your theme
for several reasons.
Right. Yeah.
That strong anti-communist sentiment, conservative business leadership, suspicion of federal authority, resistance to civil rights initiatives, and wealthy donors willing to support highly conservative causes.
A key component.
Yeah. So, as a result, Dallas becomes one of the country's most visible John Birch Society presences. And it actually became part of the city's image, believe it or not. So it was adopted as it was okay to be very staunchly John Birch.
Yeah.
So while our cast of characters weren't directly related, we couldn't tie them directly to the John Birch Society, the presence of an organization offered a tribe. It offered that tribe a sense of belonging that helped organize conservative ideological activism. Right. So think of it as connective tissue, a super highway for ideas to spread.
Right.
It didn't necessarily run Dallas like a trilateral commission pulling strings behind the scenes.
Right.
But it had become part of the city's vocabulary. Its warnings about communist infiltration and federal betrayal and national decline.
I think it's identity. It's to some degree.
That was the definition of it.
Right.
It echoed throughout meeting halls and living rooms and church basements and political gatherings. So whether Dallas deserved the label or not, much of America had come to see the city through a John Birch colored lens.
Right.
So, and that's, while that last one's a group, we've got four
no, but I think the last one knitted it together. Okay. Yeah. I'm saying it was almost you used the word platform earlier. This is kind of the framework that allowed this to kind of coalesce to where it had some sort of power and of authority and really, again, back to momentum. And that's from what you're explaining, what was happening in the early 60s.
Yep.
As a pushback to this demon that they saw that was, attacking their core values. And again, a very common theme.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
All right. So, before we wrap up, I want to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I have about just a few minutes. I want to kind of explain a little bit about Kennedy himself and how this kind of works into this theme that you've laid out so brilliantly.
I love it.
And you get that right, brilliantly.
Oh,
because you're
Lee. In there.
Yeah, okay. And how this also creates some confusion in my mind. And later you can also help with this. I mean, I have my answer, but it needs to be challenged. So, JFK, as we all know, was a dynamic personality, and it even started in his youth. And his father, Joe, which was the master behind their success and their empire and what they were able to do, was the ambassador to Britain pre-World War II and into World War II for a portion of the war. Okay. And Joe was, for the most part, an isolationist. Okay. He
very much so.
Yeah. He was associated with Neville's, and he was part of that whole scene.
Yep.
Appeasement. And you can understand that argument because 20 years prior to that, we had millions of people killed in a bloody battle, and no one wanted to get back in the war. So, there's good debate about what they were attempting to do. Had a great intention.
Bob's an isolationist is what we're hearing here.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but you can understand it, right? And Joe believed in that. Now, interestingly enough, he brought Jack over into Europe several times prior to the war. The first time Jack toured Europe, both Germany and France and the UK, and met with dignitaries. And here's a kid that was, I say a kid, he was 21, I think, just, fresh out of Harvard, and actually still, I think, writing as part of his degree program. And he had a lot of these experiences, and he had his own personal observations. Then he comes over again in 39, and he spends time in not only France and the UK again, but also Berlin. He sees all this. He's observer of the Nazism at its its point, almost its climax. Ascendant. Sure. And in fact, he leaves Berlin the day that the Germans or the Nazis invaded Poland. Okay, so the day of the start of the war, he is leaving Berlin. All right, so Jack has observed all this. Meanwhile, you got his father, who has this very isolationist mindset. Okay, from his history and what he's seen. Well, as you probably know, Joe fell out of favor. Roosevelt
very much so
couldn't rely on him. Yeah. Joe was not a fan of Churchill, or at least he didn't align with Churchill.
Churchill was not a fan of Joe.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it was mutual. Yeah. And Franklin did not believe that Joe understood what needed to be done, and that Joe was wrong. So he pulled him back. Yep. All right. But meanwhile, Jack comes back and he writes I think you understand, a paper that says While We Slept, and was talking about the rise of Germany. Yeah. Or think about what Jack's writing here. It became very popular. It was published, mostly in magazines, but it was. I think there was discussion about it becoming a book. I don't think it ever did. But meanwhile, Jack is forming his own conclusions about what he sees in the world.
So is he? I mean, While We Slept, that title in and of itself leads me to believe that he probably had to be critical of his father's complicity in allowing these things to happen.
That is my assumption, but I think it was. He treated it more gingerly than that. All right.
I think he would have.
Yeah. And I don't think he had fully formed, his worldview at that point, because he's still 23 years old. Okay. Yeah. And
a lot more worldly than a lot of us by the age of 23, without a doubt. But
trained on the international front. So think about what all that entails, right? Yeah. So he has that view, and he has that experience. And then, of course, he, Pearl Harbor happens. He actually enlisted into the Navy prior to that, but he was at a desk job, but he was campaigning to see action because he wanted to do his duty. The thing about Jack, even though he had great presentation skills, he had a great brand, And he was the first modern politician in the U.S. that, was really focused on the brand and presentation more than maybe some other things. Most people feel like he had genuinely good attributes.
Okay.
And one of the things that he cared about was making sure he sacrificed for the country as well. So what he did is he joined the Navy and he went off to war. And of course, PT 109, we understand what happened there. We won't have to get into that story, but he was considered a war hero.
Right.
Okay. So, he's had these kinds of experiences and is really beginning to learn from them. And he comes back, he runs for Congress. I believe that was in 46. No, that was a little too early, probably 51 or something of that nature. And I'm glad I'm spot on with my facts.
Always.
This is the way. Anyway, he runs for Congress. And interesting.
Everyone fact check Bob in the notes.
Yes. Of course, he wins his congressional seat, but it's kind of well understood. He was bored with that.
Yeah.
He was bored with representing the working class common man. He cared about him, but that's not what what really got him excited.
Yeah.
What got him excited was world politics. And out of his experiences, he had a very international view that the U.S. had a prominent role to play in world politics, not isolationism, but it was dependent upon the U.S. to really go make a difference and go make a change, right? And so he was very forceful for that. In fact, he became more right-leaning when it came to communism and the oppression of communism than almost some of the majority players in his party, the Democratic Party, and even some Republicans. So now let's remember what we talked about to this point about what was happening in Dallas. Now you have Kennedy, who's kind of the ultimate anti-communist because of his experiences and what he's been able to learn and the way he's bringing those to the forefront, right? So he goes through the process. He wins his Senate deal. He likes that Senate deal. He wins his election. And, he fortunately, he was not voted to be or not he was not, what am I looking for, encouraged to be the VP candidate with Adlai Stevenson because, of course, Stevenson got trounced, which, of course, he would because he run against Ike. All right. And so he got out of that, but his presentation at the nomination speech in, I believe it was 56, was where he really propelled even further, into the political sphere. So now Kennedy is he's representative of the new American youthful politician that has the energy that wants to move ahead, But he's also an adamant anti-communist and an internationalist, And so being a globalist, he runs against Nixon, all right? And the theme is basically Nixon and Kennedy pretty much had the same view on almost all the issues. Again, this is back, they both were in the center of the party. This is back when these parties had a very common ground, And the consensus is that Kennedy won because, of course, they televised debates and he presented better and he was more modern and he had that kind of image and brand. And, there's other discussions about
Fred
how
Flintstone versus John Hamm.
Yeah.
I mean, it was,
he wins on television. He ties off television with Nixon. Okay.
Well,
so that is what's happening. So now there's fragmentation in the Democratic Party, right? Because you have the civil rights movement, which none of the Southern Democrats were going to support. We all understand that, know that. Kennedy comes to Dallas because he needs to unite that party. So Kennedy comes to Dallas. When he comes to Dallas, think about this and everything we talked about. He is probably one of the strongest anti-communists, and by 63, he's proven that. He had responsibility for the Bay of Pigs problem. We'll call it a failure, which it was, but he also had success and with phenomenal judgment to keep the world from burning during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Absolutely right.
But he stood up to, the communist leadership. And it's interesting to me with all that, with that kind of background. Of course, he is Catholic. He thought he had solved that issue. He's coming here to unite the party, the best he can. And when he does arrive here, in spite of everything that Dallas was known for, right?
Mhm.
When he does arrive, he's so well received by both Fort Worth and Dallas, and the throngs of people embraced him. And it was really an outpouring of love based all they can observe. So even though you had this strong leadership group that was these extremists on the right wing side, it appeared to be that there was the majority of the population just loved Kennedy. They loved him for his promise, his energy, his asking for sacrifice. The guy was appeared to be a real leader.
Yep.
But what that tells me, even though there's contradictions, because he is anti-communist and so was this extreme, there was also this tribalism that we talked about.
Right.
Kennedy represented the foreigners. There were some policy differences. And I think with that, no matter even with some of those similar policy, especially on the international front, those policy positions may have been, that animosity was going to be there no matter, because that tribe, to your point, had won. It had garnered that kind of powerful support.
Right.
And now Kennedy's walking into a difficult spot, even though he had the love of the majority of the people. At least it appeared he did, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's what I find so fascinating about everything you described and who Kennedy really was, and and from his positions. So
it's interesting, and what jumps out at me is, because I agree with you, Kennedy did have a strong anti-communist position. Right. I think history backs that up.
Right.
On a global stage.
Yes. Right.
But why was it that the folks that we've talked about today didn't see Kennedy as being strong enough on communism?
Isn't it fascinating?
So what is it about the nature of truth? And what is real and what is not, and what is pure politics, and what is, Democrats are Democrats, and if I'm a Republican, Democrats are the enemy.
Exactly.
Or he's Catholic, he can't be trusted.
Right?
Is he really strong on communists?
Yeah.
Or is he having a backdoor conversation?
Which, by the way, the Catholic Church was very anti-communist as well. So
Absolutely.
I think that probably did some service and even influence. So,
but that's a big fracture in the story you told of Kennedy and the story I told of the people, right? So I think, one of the things that we should hit on in this next episode, and I think we're probably going to wrap it up here pretty quick.
Right.
But in the next episode is maybe an examination of what the hell was driving that. Because Kennedy demonstrated again on a national level on television that he was against it through words and actions.
Right. And I'll leave this question for you. We're not going to answer it today, but I'm going to leave this question for you as we wrap up. Was Oswald influenced at all by any of this? And you and I may have different opinions on that. So that's going to be interesting. So,
I like
with that, you think we should stop this thing?
I mean, I want to wrap up.
Okay.
Just real quick, So, what we've learned today, we've spent some time exploring. So we've spent some. That's our bartender bringing us another round. So great guy. But we've spent some time exploring the people and the organizations and the ideas that shaped Dallas in '63.
Right.
We hit on Walker. We hit on Hunt, Dealey, Criswell, and the John Birch Society. How they represented different corners of Dallas, but they voiced the same concerns.
Right.
And whether you agreed with them or not, their influence helped create an atmosphere where political tensions ran unusually high.
Yeah.
And by the fall of 1963, Dallas had developed a reputation, whether fairly or unfairly, as a city where those tensions were especially visible.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that's just the backdrop. Right? So we're going to talk more about some of the events that lead to November 22nd of 1963.
Right.
When we get together next, and we're gonna move from the climate to the forecast. When you look back at some of the events, you'll see that we were on a track that was it was a bad one.
Yeah. No matter what. It was
no matter what.
Something bad was going to happen, right?
So we're going to talk about the protests. We're going to talk about the controversies. We'll hit some of those warning signs,
Yeah.
And we'll hit some of those moments that in hindsight really do foreshadow what was to come.
Yeah.
Again, we had no idea that it was going to end up exactly the way that it did.
Right.
But, we knew something was coming. And it's because before Dealey Plaza happened, there were warning signs. History, hindsight's 2020. But you can take a look and see.
This will be an interesting conversation.
I think it will.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where we're going to pick up next time. So until then, Bob, thanks much.
Well, I'm just glad to be here at Jack Ruby's.
Jack Ruby's. Exactly.
It seems to fit, Lee.
Yeah, there's not a Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, there is.
There is, buddy.
There sure is.
We'll do one.
Exactly
in fact,
right.
the next one we may do from Oswald.
Maybe we do that.
Right. Lee Harvey's. It's not Oswald's.
Lee Harvey's. But yeah, no. I like the idea. Let's explore it.
All right. Great.
Until then.
Thanks, Lee.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Today we stepped away from the events of November 22nd, 1963, and looked instead at the city that made those events possible. Not because Dallas caused the assassination, and not because the people we discussed today were part of some hidden conspiracy, but because history is shaped long before history is made. We met a retired general, an oil billionaire, a newspaper publisher, a prominent pastor, and an organization that gave many of their ideas a home. They came from different worlds, but together they helped create an atmosphere that made Dallas unlike any other American city. By the fall of 1963, Dallas had become a place with a national reputation, a city where political divisions ran especially deep, a city where the rhetoric had grown louder, and a city that President Kennedy chose to visit anyway. But understanding the people is only half the story. Next time, we'll shift our attention from the personalities to the events that occurred in the months leading up to President Kennedy's arrival in Dallas. The demonstrations, the newspaper advertisements, the ominous warnings, the moments that, in hindsight, feel impossible to ignore. History rarely announces itself as it's happening. Only later do we recognize the signs that were there all along. Until next time, keep digging.